Hello, Cubs fans, and welcome to a brand new edition of Cubs on Tap. It feels so good to be back because not only are we back talking Cubs baseball, but we're back talking Cubs baseball after yet another series win. Feels so good to be back. A Wednesday day game. It's an early show here today with you guys. Following the getaway day game, Cubs defeat the Minnesota Twins 8-2 on Wednesday. That seals a series victory for your Chicago Cubbies. In addition to that, we get to talk about some other cool topics here on today's show. Besides just a series win, before we get into everything, I want to remind every single one of you Cubs on Tap. You can find us here on the On Tap Sportsnet YouTube channel. Be sure to follow at On Tap Sportsnet on X while we get the broadcast issues sifted out there. In addition to that, be sure to head over again to the YouTube page, like, subscribe, hit the little bell button. You'll know when all of our great shows go live, including us right here at Cubs on Tap. My hair is a mess. It's long, but we got the W bandana on today because vibes are high. Things are feeling good here on the north side of Chicago. Before we get into everything Cubs baseball, hope everybody's doing well on this happy hump day. We got Jeremiah here in the comments. He says, Cubs series win, and he's eating quesadillas. All is right in the world. I would tend to agree with that. I haven't had a quesadilla in a while. That sounds pretty good, sir. Celebration quesadillas. Sounds like a great way to spend a Wednesday. But let's talk about other great ways to spend a Wednesday. If you were able to make it out to the ballpark today, literally a perfect day for Cubs baseball, physically, not just the score at the end of the day, not just what they did on the field, but just in general, right? It was, 76 degrees and sunshine? I mean, you couldn't have picked a better day if you were out at the ballpark today. But let's get into some of the series results here, and where we're going to start is unfortunately on Monday. We have to bring this one back to light. Cubs were blanked by the Minnesota Twins to start this series off. David Festa took the mound, pitched really, really well in this one for the Minnesota Twins. He only went 5 innings, but he paid 9 Cubs, which is one of those nights at Wrigley Field on Monday night. Maybe a little bit of a hangover from the series win against the Cardinals. It's kind of a shame because Kyle Hendricks was really good in this game despite picking up his 10th loss, went 6 innings, just giving up 5 hits, just the 2 earned, a walk and 5 Ks for him. Jorge Lopez came in and was sensational. 1 inning of work with 2 Ks, but then Pearson gave up the insurance run late, but still had 2 Ks and 2 innings of work and just 2 hits given up. So again, Cubs pitchers only gave up 8 hits in the game, only 3 runs, but the offense was completely silent. Just 4 hits, 6 total base runners with 2 additional walks for the Cubs on Monday night. So again, if you like good pitching, that was a fun one because of what Hendricks did on the mound. But really, ultimately, at the end of the day, Monday, kind of a wash, kind of a gross game. It's funny, I was at Sunday night's game. I'm sure a lot of you saw or have listened at least to the podcast after that one. We had a little bit of a Sunday fun day at the ballpark because the Cubs capped off a series win against the Cardinals. Did not go to Monday's game. Keep in mind, but we were at Tuesday night's game, and we're going to get to that right now. Tuesday's game was a lot of fun. We got to see the first Isaac Paredes home run in a Cubs uniform. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail here in just a few minutes. Shody Managa was spectacular yet again. Things you love to absolutely see. And really, the bullpen was really good as well. Drew Smyly did give up a home run, but it really didn't matter at that point in the game. Tyson Miller closes things out for the Cubbies. No saves needed. Shota picked up his 9th win. And then obviously today, the 8-2 win, as we noted a little bit earlier, it was an onslaught for the Cubs. In totality, the 8 runs scored, as we said, just 8 hits for the Cubs, but 5 walks. That certainly helped the Cubs in this one. A couple wild pitches as well. Ryan only lasted 2 innings in this one. Winder actually ended up being their most used pitcher. He pitched 3 full innings. Assad only made it through 4, but really didn't matter. Jorge Lopez was really good again for the Cubs. 2 clean innings, just 2 hits given up, 2 punch outs as well. Porter Hodge was really good once again with 2 Ks. Merriweather closes the door. So Cubs able to use their bullpen a little bit more on Wednesday. With Assad's issues of command, pitch counts getting really, really high. They haven't had to really worry about it today with the off day coming up here on Thursday. But I think in general from this series, what we learned about this Cubs team is this offense is there, right? Monday was very much, I think, an anomaly. And it's kind of weird, right? Monday was a little bit flip-flopped, right? It was kind of starting to die down in terms of like the wind being a factor. Tuesday, Wednesday, the wind was totally a factor in both of those games. I'll be honest with you. I think there could have been more runs in each of those games overall, just because of the nature of some of the balls that were hit. PCA almost had one that was knocked down by the wind. There was a couple other ones as well. You really want to see them, continue just what they're doing, because I think the power numbers will continue to be there, especially some of these ballparks that they're going to go to where the wind is probably going to play a little bit less of a factor, or even more of a factor, quite frankly, in Cleveland. And we'll talk about that here a little bit later. We'll put a little bookmark in that one as well. But things you'll love to see from a series results standpoint: Cubs taking care of business against these Minnesota Twins. We got a couple of comments here as well. Jeremiah says he's also been up since 12:30 a.m. That's always fun. I apologize to hear that. That's never a good sign. Tomina too says Cubs have been doing great. Sure have. We're going to talk about that here and break down some of the numbers here in a little bit. And we will absolutely take a series win. Just because, well, again, series wins are cool and tough, as we all know here and on Tap Sports Net. Let's get into it here, shall we? Let's talk about Isaac Paredes' first home run on Tuesday night. I think this one was a breath of relief for a lot of people. I'm sure it was for Isaac Paredes. I think it was for a lot of Cubs fans as well. He's a good hitter. This guy's an all-star. I think a lot of people forget that. I know a lot of people were concerned because as soon as he got to the Cubs, he wasn't hitting a ton. He had a couple doubles early on in that Reds series right after he was acquired. He's done some good things. But Tuesday night was kind of the Isaac Paredes game in a lot of ways. Gets the big 3-run home run. I'll tell you right now, folks, as somebody sitting in the left field bleachers watching that ball leave the yard, if that's a normal night at Wrigley in August, which usually means the wind's blowing out, even if it's not by much, right? Let's say in that game, gusts were up to about 22 miles per hour, I believe it said on the radar. Most normal nights, the wind's probably blowing out at about 6 miles per hour. So it's not a huge difference to balls in flight, but it certainly helps a little bit. If this ball is hit on one of those warm nights in August, typically, it's on Waveland. The ball was crushed by Paredes. And unfortunately, the wind continued to knock it down. But a tisket, a tasket, it was in the basket. And ultimately, he gets his first. That was a big one after back-to-back singles for the Cubs as well, to get a pair of base runners in front of him, driving in those early runs, getting to a really good pitcher like Pablo Lopez early. 3 runs right off the jump for the Cubbies. And again, Isaac Paredes gets another one back a little bit later. Kai's all excited because the Cubs won a series, and my lovely fiance just got home. Paredes picks up his 4th ribby a little bit later. Just a little bloop. People, he doesn't hit very hard. Yeah, sometimes all you need is a little bloop single into shallow right with good base runners on, and ultimately the run comes around to score. Paredes was thrown out at second, but nonetheless they were up 4-0 at that point. Obviously, the 2-run bomb given up by Shota kind of took the wind out of the fan sails, at least temporarily, but obviously the Cubs were able to come back and take care of business with some insurance runs late in that game. Those obviously coming via a nice Dansby Swanson triple, which thank you, wind, because that certainly helped on that one. And we also got to see PCA driving a run later as an insurance run. So again, I think Isaac Paredes getting his first was awesome. It was cool to be there in person for that as well. He played really good defense as well in this series, made a nice play on Monday night. So it was a good series overall for Isaac Paredes, and I'm sure he's pretty stoked to have gotten that first one off of his shoulders, we'll call it, for lack of a better term. Jeremiah says here, Isaac's homer was a homer in 28 out of 30 ballparks, but it only went in the basket. Yep, that's the wind. It was like 22 mile per hour wind gusts coming straight in from dead center. So the only place in the ballpark that you could hit it with any kind of height was probably right at the scoreboard, and you still had to hit it pretty hard. But if you look at the 2 Minnesota Twins homers, those things were line drives, and that's why they got out of the yard. But Paredes, despite it being hung up in the air, still able to get it out because that thing was absolutely moonshot. Tomina Tusa Paredes' home run was much further than it actually was. The wind was absolutely fighting the ball. It really was. Like I said, again, as somebody who was sitting there watching it die down the line as it came, it was truly impressive to see at the end of the day. Tomina 2 also says here, Pete had a hard hit ball yesterday that would have also usually been a home run. Yes, fly out to the warning check. That ball 100% is 3 rows into the bleachers on any semi-normal night in August at Wrigley. Um, it's just one of those things that we'll have to see. To me, too, one more thing. He says, speaking of, loved Pete in this series. He did awesome. He's come a long way. He really has. I think he still has some of the rookie mistakes, but that's to be expected. But I think now we're starting to finally see the Craig Counsell effect with young players. I truly believe that here, and we're starting to see that with a guy like Pete Crow Armstrong, where they're letting him play through the mistakes, right? They're letting him learn on the job. They're letting him battle through his struggles. And so far, it has come back to work in the Cubs' favor. So things you absolutely do love to see in totality there from a guy like Pete Crow Armstrong in this series. Let's also talk here, folks, about another guy, specifically in Tuesday's game, who was really, really good, and that is Shota Imanaga. Shota absolutely shoved on Tuesday night. He was a pleasure to watch as always. Just the one homer given up, only 2 base hits given up the entire game, walked a single guy, 10 punchies and 7 innings of work, only threw 92 pitches as well in the outing. He lowers his ERA now to a 3.06 on the season. I believe it was a 3.09 coming into the game, if I remember correctly. So he picks up a couple of points. Things you love to see from Shota Imanaga. The fastball looked really good again in person, seeing it with that kind of that negative vertical, and it keeps that plane all the way in on the batter. It's truly, truly spectacular to see in person and watch him pitch. And he'll lull you to sleep if you're not careful, just because he's so efficient, he's so quick. And quite frankly, I think he shoves. The splitter looked really good as well. He made a lot of guys look silly on that splitter because, again, there's like no other lefties in baseball that throw a splitter. He's the only one that does. And especially with that high fastball, when he's able to create that tunnel with the fastball and then just that splitter that drops off the face of the earth, mixes in his other pitches a little bit more now as well compared to when he first started pitching for the Cubs this season. I think overall it's things you love to see. And yes, gentlemen, Shota. Tyler was there in spirit certainly last night, and it was a lot of fun. Comment here from Tamina too. Speaking of Shota Imanaga, he says, in my opinion, literally his best outing of the season. Stuff looked amazing, fast, controlled, sharp, tons of movement, just perfect. It really was. And honestly, if you think about the guy that he gave up a home run to, Royce Lewis is having a spectacular season for the Minnesota Twins. I know probably a lot of Cubs fans like myself probably don't pay a lot of attention to the AL just by default, unless you are truly a baseball fan and you watch all teams across the league. Royce Lewis has been a huge part of why the Twins are A, in first place in the AL Central, but B, why they have the 4th best offense in baseball right now. The crazy thing about it for the Twins, really, like, you could make the argument the Cubs caught them at the right time. No Carlos Correa, no Byron Buxton in this series for any of these games. Royce Lewis still made a difference, and he's a damn good ball player. So really the one mistake was to a guy who's having an unreal season. Everybody else Shota made easy work of, and it's absolutely what you love to see. Smiley looked good. Tyson Miller has continued to look good. Can we talk about the fact Tyson Miller's 1.96 ERA? He's been that good for the Cubs. Talk about Jed. I know we like to clown Jed. I know people like to get down on Jed Hoyer. Jay says second in the division. Sorry, they still have 61 wins. Regardless, they're doing a lot better than the Cubs are in terms of wins losses. But you look at like just some of the moves that Jed has pulled off, and this Tyson Miller one probably looks the best. That and the Jorge Lopez as well. Lopez has been spectacular for the Cubs. Again, the whole bullpen has, but some of these bullpen additions by Jed, kind of piecemealing this thing together, have been really, really good. And we got to see one of those guys on Tuesday night. And then we got to see Lopez today, and he picks up the win. He's 2-2 now on the season. He has a 2.51 ERA. Smiley's got a 2.56 ERA. Hodge with a 2.59 ERA. I mean, this Cubs team has guys that are, sub 2.6 ERA all across the board now in that bullpen. And what a difference it's made from the start of the season. But Shota certainly shoved on Tuesday night. It was a good one. It was a lot of fun to watch and see. Hank says here, steak tacos, cold beer, and a Cubs win makes for a good Wednesday. It sure does. Steak tacos sounds good. I'm having steak myself tonight, just not in taco form, but that does sound delicious. I'm not even going to sit here and lie to you. Let's get to something that I've seen pop up in the comments here a little bit. I was going to save it till a little bit later in the show, but I know everybody wants to talk about it, and that is the Adbert injury. Kind of bummer news if you're a big Adbert Alzolay fan. I think a lot of people are because of who he is as a person, not just the ball player. Really rough news for him. Tommy John surgery is ultimately the route that they're going to take with his recovery. As a lot of people might remember, he went on the 15-day IL way back in May. It was after that Pirates series, right around Mother's Day weekend. Then he's moved to the 60-day in June. People are like, well, maybe he can get back later in the year. There started to come some whispers that they weren't totally sure if he'd even be back. He tried to go on a rehab assignment first in Arizona. Then I believe he was on his way to either AA Tennessee or AAA Iowa to try and give it a shot at the end of July. And it just didn't work out, had a setback, and ultimately they went the route of Tommy John. Like Jeremiah said, this was from earlier in the show. Adbert needing Tommy John is a bummer. It really is. And Sean followed it up as well. Bad news for Adbert. Yeah, I mean, realistically here, are we seeing him in 25? Probably not, unless it's really late in the season, maybe in like September. Realistically, it's probably going to be 2026 for Adbert Alzolay at this point, which for him sucks because you figure he's 29 right now. And this is a guy that has just been beat down and battered over the course of his career with injuries. Obviously, a failed starter. They find a role from him in the bullpen. He has that magical run at the end of 2023, picks up 22 saves in the second half of the season, was phenomenal and incredible. Now he's going to lose his age 30 season, and he's not going to be back till his age 31 season. Now, granted, he's not a guy that throws with huge, just bombardment velocity where from, 31 to 35, he's going to just fall off the face of the earth, hopefully. But now he's finding himself in a less advantageous place now to extend his career, really, because this is like Talina 2 says here, 29 is a part of that peak of your career. And especially in baseball, right? Like certain sports are different. Obviously, football, a lot of guys tail off after 30 just because of the physical pounding that your body takes. But in terms of the, overall human body, by definition, technically, your peak is usually like 28 to 32. So, yeah, Adbert is very much in the peak of his career right now. So to see him substantially lose most of 2024 and have an awful start to 2024 on top of it, right? That just kind of adds insult to injury at this point. And now he has to rebound from Tommy John surgery next season. I mean, and this is the part that sucks. And I hate bringing this up, and I'm not trying to be negative, but this is something that I think we as fans have to kind of keep in mind too. It's not all cut and dry that he's going to come back from Tommy John and be the same pitcher, if not better. Some guys can, right? Like we've seen it time and time and again, guys do come back and they've been good. But then there's also guys who there's examples right here within the Cubs organization that this has happened to. Look at a guy like Cody Hoyer. Remember Cody Hoyer? He's not even with the organization anymore because he had Tommy John and he kind of fell off, and then they ultimately end up letting him go after he's unable to fully rehab. So I'm not saying they're just going to let Adbert leave like that, but that's something that has to be considered is if there's setbacks or if he's just not the same pitcher again after the surgery. I hope for his sake, because I'm a huge fan of Adbert Alzolay. I love the personality that he is and what he brings to a Cubs organization that I think, and a fan base that falls in love with players that are just really cool people. I hope he's able to come back and be even a shadow of himself. But again, he's got a long road back, and we're probably not seeing Adbert much before, 2026 at this point. Maybe we get to see him a little bit at the end of 2025, and that's probably being, that's probably being generous at this point. So we'll just have to wait and see and where things go. Jeremiah says here, 2021 second half, Cody Hoyer was supposed to be special. Yeah. And he was really good. He was really good. And Then 2022, he has surgery and never came back by 2023. And I don't even know if he's pitching in Major League Baseball right now. I mean, but that's the unfortunate nature, right? Like, I know Tommy John has become increasingly easier to recover from in today's, world of baseball and in modern medicine, but it's not a guarantee by any means. Like, guys do come back and are not the same. So, again, hopefully for Adbert's sake, that isn't the case, but we're just going to have to wait and see, and certainly wishing him nothing but a speedy, speedy recovery. A couple of comments that have popped up here throughout the comment section tie into our next point and where we're taking this conversation from here. A little bit earlier in the show, I believe it was Jeremiah said Michael Busch is freaking good. I tend to agree. He is pretty freaking good. Darren said here, he says, did he bump his head? But timely hits, great at bats, taking walks, aggressive base running, great bullpen usage, no panics, play hard with desire, go Cubs. It's been nice. They've been playing good ball. And we're gonna dive in again to some of the stats here in a few minutes. Jeremiah says that Hoyer's with the Rangers organization. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. But let's talk about our next point here, because I've been mulling this over pretty much all day today. Pretty much this entire afternoon. The game started at 1:20. We'll do the math. Cubs were probably due up by 1:30, 1:35. Pretty much since about 1:40 this afternoon, we'll call it. It's now almost 6 o'clock Chicago time when I'm recording. I think there is a humongous case to be made. I think it needs to be seriously considered. And I think there's a world where the Cubs have 2 out of 3 finalists. But I think Michael Busch for Rookie of the Year is not a crazy thing to talk about right now. So let's get into that, because I've got numbers. Right? We saw today, obviously Busch had a great day on Wednesday. 2 hits for him, one of which was the homer. He walked as well. Rose's averaged to 261. Excuse me, I'm trying not to sneeze on camera right now. An 811 OPS as well. Now on the season, he's really found a home in that number 2 hole in this lineup on a day-to-day basis for a guy like Craig Counsell. And I can't help but sit here first off and say, what a trade that this has turned out to be for the Cubs, even just in year one. And the specs on it look really, really good for years to come. And I'm gonna get to that here in a second. But I want to make the pitch first for Michael Busch Rookie of the Year, because I do think Shota Managa is absolutely going to be in the conversation from an NL just rookie standpoint. There's not a ton of great rookie pitchers this year. And by great, I mean, like, nobody's running away with this race by any stretch of imagination. But Shota's right up there. I think Shota's going to be a finalist for Rookie of the Year in the NL. But Michael Busch should absolutely be in that same conversation as well. And I know that, Jeremiah says here, it might be Skeens. It might be, and they might go with the flashy option. But I think the one thing we have to worry about now with Skeens is, how much is he actually going to pitch down the stretch here for Pittsburgh? Are they going to put him on an inning count? Because if they put him on an inning count, I think that hurts his case to be the NL Rookie of the Year. I think otherwise he should be. I mean, he's been incredible. But again, I still think the Cubs have the other 2 finalists then in this conversation, Jeremiah. I truly do. Shota's been incredible, and he's pitched the most innings of any rookie. Obviously, he's not a traditional rookie, right? He's 30 years old, but that's what happens when you come over from Japan. And in addition to that, Busch is like top. He's no worse than 6th in every major category. And this is amongst all rookies, not just NL rookies. And now a lot of the top rookies are in terms of bats, are guys in the AL, like Colton Cowser. There's a couple other names that are up there as well. But Michael Busch is tied for first in home runs among all rookies. He's tied with Colton Cowser, Baltimore Orioles. He's number 5 in runs driven in amongst all rookies. He's number 2 in doubles. He is number 6 in total batting average. He's number 3 in on-base percentage, number 2 in slugging. He's number 2 in total OPS, and he's tied for first in games played. I think that's a very important statistic here, because there's a lot of rookies who, although qualified, maybe just are on a hot stretch right now or haven't played, more than 100 games. I think there's actually only like 3 or 4 rookies that have played over 100 games that are among the quote-unquote qualified rookies in terms of offensive category. That is impressive from a guy who I don't want to call him a castaway because I don't think that's what he was from the Dodgers. He was just blocked by some really, really good players out there in LA. But this is the perfect example of Jed identifying, hey, this guy would look really good for us. He would bring something to our lineup that we don't have. Left-handed bat is something that we bitched about all of last year to complement a guy like Cody Bellinger, a guy that could play first base consistently because that was a freaking revolving door last season, and he's done that. And I think what's more impressive is it's not only him being really, really good as a bat. Like this is beyond Michael Busch being good as a bat because he's also first in defensive runs saved amongst all first basemen. This isn't just rookies, all first basemen in baseball. Think about that one for a second. Like gold glovers have less defensive runs saved than Michael Busch. For example, the next two best first basemen tied for second are Christian Walker out in Arizona and Matt Olson down in Atlanta. They both have 7 defensive runs saved. So Michael Busch has been not only a really good offensive hitter, like Tamina 2 says here, he's consistent and he hits for power, but he's also been one of the better defensive first basemen, period, in baseball. To me, Michael Busch could be a finalist for a first base gold glove in the NL. Do I think he's going to win it? Probably not because somebody's going to get the name recognition. But Michael Busch has been really freaking good this year. And I know Cubs fans appreciate how good Michael Busch has been. But I think now is the time, and at least this is something I've thought about well beyond 140 this afternoon. I think it's finally time where we can say, yeah, Michael Busch has an 811 OPS, and that's okay. Maybe he is truly just one of the best bats on this team. What is so bad about that, right? Because, and I know guys are like, well, your big guns have to hit. And yes, of course they do. Seiya Suzuki's been a lot better of late. Cody Bellinger has looked pretty good overall since he's come back. I think the thumb's still bothering him a little bit from a power aspect. Ian Happ has still found a way to contribute accordingly. Dansby seems to be getting hotter. PCA starting to hit a little bit more. But, I think it's okay the fact that a guy like Michael Busch is arguably your best hitter on this team. Because, let's be real, what are the Dodgers really good at doing? Identifying talent. Andrew Friedman's there. He used to be the architect of identifying minor league talent with the Rays. Who's to say that Michael Busch doesn't become a star, like a true star for the Chicago Cubs for a long time as well? And this is where it transitions to a little bit more forward looking because, like Tomina 2 says here, wow, he knew he was good defensively. That stat is surprising. It is. But again, I think because early in the season, there was some of those moments of he's getting used to first base. But it just shows, in my opinion, his athleticism, how good of an athlete he truly is. Again, mind you, this is a guy that's played second and third base as well. He's looked really good at first. He's played how many plays has he made where he's making, quick picks on liners that are close to the ground and making those kind of plays over there at first base. He's done it routinely. And now that he's gotten more comfortable with the position, we don't see the stupid errors from Michael Busch anymore that we might have seen in the first 10, 20, 30 games of the season. I think Michael Busch is not only a great addition and guy for this season, but we have to look beyond that as well, right? This wasn't, I know a lot of people might sit here and be like, well, Shota might be the best offseason acquisition or in-season acquisition that Jed has made. Some people might argue it's a Tyson Miller or a Jorge Lopez or a guy that Tamina 2 listed here a little bit earlier, and a guy like Tinoco, who's been serviceable, to say the least, at least out of the bullpen. Maybe he hasn't been the most world beater, but was a good pickup for next to nothing nonetheless. Michael Busch cost you 2 lottery tickets in 2 very distant, far-off prospects. That, for the Dodgers, was very advantageous because they didn't need to be on the 40-man roster. Busch did. So the Cubs said, yeah, we'll take the guy that you physically have to create a 40-man spot for, and we'll make him play every day. He's 26. And mind you, he's not even arbitration eligible yet. I think that's the most important key here with Michael Busch. I was looking into this today because I wanted to know, what is the timeline on Michael Busch as a Chicago Cub? And right now, He's pre-arbitration in 2025. It's going to be his age 27 season, right? We were just talking about the whole prime thing with Adbert Alzolay being 29. Okay. Pre-arb in 2026. It's going to be his age 28 season. And then he's still got 3 years of arbitration. So the Cubs are going to have him through his age 31 season, if I do my math correctly. They could have Michael Busch over the course of his prime. And maybe they do a sweetheart deal with him after the next 2 years. Maybe they say, we will buy out some of your ARB years and pay you a little extra up front so that way we can keep you under control long term. Who knows what they're going to do? But regardless, even if you play the game, whoever is the head of operations for the Cubs, whether it continues to be Jed into the future or whoever the next guy up is, you have Michael Busch in 2 years of pre-arbitration where you're going to pay him effectively less than $1 million for the next 2 years. And then even from there with arbitration, right? Look at Isaac Paredes. Isaac Paredes is only making like $3.4 million this year. And that's after, and he was an all-star. That number is going to increase at the end of this season. But who's to say that Michael Busch can't be a stalwart of this Cubs team for the foreseeable future? Juice loves to sit on here, and we love to talk about it with Juice, about the amount of financial flexibility in terms of the roster this front office has moving forward, right? And just what that is going to look like for years to come. You have a Kyle Hendricks falling off the books. You have, a David Bodie who's probably not going to be back with the organization, and that's going to free up over $5 million. You have guys like Paredes and Wisdom who are still arbitration controlled in some way, shape, or form. Nico Horner might not be a Cub, and even if he is, he's a UFA in 2027. Dansby is the only guy under contract on this entire list beyond 2028 other than Shota Imanaga. Get like guaranteed contract per se. There's a lot of flexibility. And if you got a guy like Michael Busch, who's got 2 more years of being a pre-arb player, it's really hard to look past how good this move has been for the Cubs and the type of season that Michael Busch is having. And I personally am really excited about what Michael Busch has done. And I'll be honest with you, I think he's slowly becoming one of my favorite Cubs just because he seems to do everything well. And I think as he gets more and more comfortable playing defensively at first base, maybe he's the answer at first for years to come for the Cubs. And, I think with his power numbers, like he's put up good numbers this year, not necessarily great numbers. He's probably going to get more than 20. I would bet he's going to probably sniff 25 when it's all said and done. I would expect his power numbers to only increase from here as well. That's also something to keep in mind with a guy like Michael Busch. And I think it's going to be incredibly interesting to observe over the course. A couple more comments here. This was from Tamina too a little bit earlier. He says it'll probably be Skeens just because it's mainly a popularity contest. Sure. Again, though, I think if you're talking true like 1, 2, 3, who the finalists will be, I think Shota and Busch are going to be in that conversation for the NL. Jeremiah said odds that Hap, Dansby, and Nico get the Gold Glove this year. I think Hap has a pretty decent chance of getting the Gold Glove. I think he's played a really good left field and continue to play a really good left field. Dansby and Nico, I don't know. But again, because of name recognition, they certainly have a chance. I don't know all 3 of them sweep again like they did a year ago, but I think if anybody's going to be likely to get a Gold Glove, it's probably Hap. If you had to make me bet on one of those 3, just based on how this season has been. Another comment here from Tamina Sue says it's hard to fully appreciate just how good Busch is because he feels nothing like a rookie. Nobody watched him in the minors. He does feel like a veteran. Yeah, and he's one of the best first basemen in baseball. I think, there's going to be a lot to see there. And then Jeremiah says Michael Busch equals Mark Grace with more power. Maybe. I don't know. I'm intrigued to see the career arc of Michael Busch because, Mark Grace didn't hit a ton of home runs, but Mark Grace hit a lot. I mean, what is Mark Grace's career batting average? Let's go find that out real quick here. Mark Grace career batting average. You guys get to hear me type on my computer. Yeah, he was a 303 hitter. But he had an 825 OPS, right? So we're talking OPS standards. Busch is right there at, 8'11", and I think that number is going to get better over time. I think, Bush is a guy, I think he walks a little more. The hit tool per se isn't there as much, but he slugs, right? It's a lot of doubles, it's a lot of homers. And again, that's what you want out of a guy, especially playing first base. Mark Grace was very much, I think, in my opinion, an anomaly at the first base position because typically it's a slugging position. But I do think you're going to continue to see a guy like Michael Bush just get better and better as time goes on. And I'll be honest with you, I'm incredibly excited to watch that from afar. Now let's talk about something else here, and we're going to continue to keep this fun. We're not done just yet, even though we're over 30 minutes into this thing. Let's talk about the Cub playoff hopes, because this was another fascinating thing that I've been keeping up with and looking at today, and just kind of mulling over what the foreseeable future for the Cubs looks like. First off, run differentials in the green now after this series. They're +7. Things you love to see, right? Clap it up for the old Cubbies. They're actually only one of 3 teams outside of the wild card that have a positive run differential that are in the conversation right now. The Cincinnati Reds being one of them, the New York Mets being the other. Obviously, Diamondbacks, Padres, Braves, all in a wild card are well above kind of, we'll call it the 500 mark per se of runs scored. But like Jeremiah says here, they are very much still alive. And I think that's why, if nothing else, Cubs baseball through the rest of August and into September is going to continue to be exciting. I think they're finally starting to play their best ball. I think Craig Counsell finally knows what kind of roster he has in his first season with Chicago. I think these guys are also kind of finally learning how to play together. Again, it's hard when you turn the team over fully year after year after year at some key positions as well. And obviously with the Morel move and some other things of that nature, it's tough to kind of navigate those waters at times. But you look at it right now, the Cubs' expected record based on just their results and things like that, their expected record is 59-58. If they were 59-58, they would be sitting pretty much right on the doorstep of the wild card at this point. And that's not even taking into account the 25 blown saves that this Cubs team has. You figure half of those get cut down, and they're either better than or right there with the Milwaukee Brewers from a record standpoint. I think the Cubs are going to have every opportunity to make the playoffs. I think the only thing that potentially prevents the Cubs from making a wild card is the fact they have almost no control over the teams in front of them. And what I mean by that is they don't really play anybody that's in front of them now the rest of the year. You've already kind of worn out all those chances, right? You've already played your 2 series with the Giants, the home and away series. You've already played the Padres. Those were taken care of very early in the season. You're pretty much done with the Cardinals now. You're pretty much done with the Brewers. And the Mets are also no longer on the schedule. So the only teams that they really are kind of competing with, and I'll call this competing with being within 8 games of the wild card, because they play the Nationals twice. They're 9 games out, are the Reds for 1 more series, and that's the very last series of the season, and then 2 with the Pirates. And you got one of those coming up here at the end of August. So there's not a ton of wiggle room for the Cubs in the sense of like, oh, we can go beat teams directly in front of us and move up the standings that way. They are very much going to have to rely on kind of everybody to beat each other up, and hopefully taking advantage of that, right? That easy schedule. Boog and Joe Girardi talked about that a little bit today on the broadcast, saying how it's nice to have, but like as a manager, you don't want to hear that, right? You don't want to hear, oh, we have an easy schedule. So when your team underperforms, you really can't, you can't get away with things, right? I think if they can continue to take care of their business, this Cubs team's got every chance, right? Because if you keep stacking up wins, inevitably all these teams are going to have to start playing each other, right? Like the Giants are going to still have to play teams in the NL West. The Diamondbacks, Padres, and Dodgers all are in the conversation of the playoffs right now. So like you're probably going to have to see them still. You've got the Cardinals who are probably going to have to play some of these teams yet. The Mets are going to have to do the same thing, especially with the NL East, right? With teams like the Phillies and the Braves and such. So like it's not totally out of it by any stretch of imagination. But they very much need teams to kind of help them out over the course of the next month, a little over a month and a half now until the end of the year. We'll call it a month and 3 weeks. They first off, they need to just take care of their own business, right? I think if this Cubs team continues to stockpile wins, and we're going to look at the schedule here in just a hot second and talk through this, I think if they continue to pile up series victories just like they have in the last two, I think they very much can be in good shape come roughly Judgment Day toward the end of the year, right? When kind of the teams start to wiggle things out. And then they need a lot of help. But again, we talked about that strength of schedule. And like Jeremiah says, they are only 5.5 out. So again, this isn't impossible by any stretch of imagination. They really do just need to A, keep playing good ball like they have the last two series, and B, they need a little bit of help. They need the teams in front of them to beat each other up a little bit and cause some teams to fall down the standings. Because again, if everybody's not playing anybody and they're all able to, just stockpile wins, you're going to have teams that work their way up there. But as we know, right, the Cubs have a very easy schedule. A lot of these teams ahead of them don't have that luxury. So they're going to have a little bit more of a tough battle to climb these NL wildcard standings than the Cubs will. They can't necessarily, the Cubs take care of direct business per se, but they certainly have the odd, the schedule makers to thank for what's to come here down the stretch. Tamina too said a little bit earlier, he says it does piss me off a little. We all knew the Cubs were this good, but it's just such a horrendous June and May that really eliminated a lot of margin for error. And they did this last year. Like, this is the exact same storyline from a year ago. You just have a different manager and arguably more talent this year, right? You look at last year, you can make the argument that some guys were hurt, early in the season. They lacked a lot of talent, right? Morel wasn't up till May last year. You had really only two starting pitchers in Stroman and Steele to begin the year. Tyone was trying to figure things out. There was a lot of what is this? Kyle Hendricks wasn't ready to go right away last season either. So they had a lot of things that they had to overcome early in the season. Belly got hurt, and obviously Belly was one of the hottest players down the stretch last year. Seiya Suzuki was hurt, and so they had to go into, kicking it into gas, and they did. And I agree with Jeremiah here. I think there has to be some appreciation for what David Ross did with last year's team. They finished above 500, despite having a lot of setbacks, a really, really piss poor roster, in my opinion, to begin the season. Obviously, they got a lot of reinforcements as the season went on. This was a better team this year, but because of a manager change and almost as many injuries, just in different fashion, really, they've had to overcome a lot of the same type of obstacles. Not the exact same, but similar. So I think, it is frustrating because it's like, oh my God, this is this year all over again, right? But this year they actually bought at the deadline, right? There was no we have to win X games to buy at the deadline. The Cubs are just like, no, we're actually going to buy. We moved off of Mark Leiter Jr. for a couple prospects, and that Jack Neely kid looks really freaking good right now in Iowa. I just want to bring that up really quick. But they have gone out and gotten Paredes. They have gone out and gotten a guy like Pearson, who I don't think we're going to appreciate what Pearson could be this year. I think it's going to be what Pearson can be next year and beyond, right? He's got those 2 more years of control coming up. We're just going to have to see how they battle it out over the rest of the season. But I think there still is a world, again, where that 5.5 games doesn't look that daunting, especially if they continue to play this well and the pitching continues to be this good, especially if the bullpen continues to keep up, because now we're starting to see the benefit of having starters go late in the games, right? Tyone, Hendricks, Steele showed up. These guys are pretty much almost guaranteed going 6 at least, if not more, pretty much on the nightly basis. So 4 out of your 5 starters are giving you length. Obviously, Assad lately hasn't given you as much length as he did early in the season. But overall, they've gotten a lot of good, healthy length from their starting pitching. It's allowed their bullpen to not get burned out down the stretch. And I think that'll also be something that we need to keep an eye on over the course. Tamina too said, agreed, Neely looks great. And Jeremiah says here, it all started with opening day with Steele getting hurt. Yeah, it really does feel that way, doesn't it? But let's talk through the schedule here again, right? Because This is just keeping in mind the type of teams that they have to play and the amount of off days that the Cubs have very much been blessed with, especially in the month of August. They have some good teams they'll play in September, but this month of August schedule is really where I think the Cubs can take advantage. And if you continue to win series, maybe you find one of these terrible teams that you can somehow manage a sweep over, then all of a sudden they are right back into this thing and able to really give it a shot, I think, down the stretch. But let's talk through it. Obviously, you got the two with the White Sox coming up this weekend. We'll talk more about that at the tail end of the show. You got the off day on Sunday, and this is, mind you, after an off day tomorrow, Thursday, August 8th. You've got 3 games with the Guardians in Cleveland. Now, the thing to note about Cleveland is that they made a change to their ballpark. So they used to have like shipping crates in their stadium that used to keep wind from blowing through the stadium out to right field. I saw this conspiracy, we'll call it, back in probably June, because there's a noticeable uptick in home runs at Progressive Field amongst, statistical categories. Wonder how that helps the Cubs, right? Guys like Bush, guys like Bellinger who can get the ball up into the jet stream during that series. I think taking advantage of the Guardians is going to be key because, again, Guardians are still a really good ball club, still a real good team. They are right now leading the division over the Twins. Twins are in a wild card spot. They are the leaders in the Central. They're going to pose some threat, but they've also lost 4 in a row. So the Cubs are catching them at a time where maybe they are skidding a little extra. We'll have to wait and see what happens there. But so you got 3 with the Guardians. Then you have another off day, and you're coming back, and it's minimal travel, right? Cleveland's a hop, skip, and a jump. Obviously, south side of Chicago is nothing. Then you're here for 3 against the Blue Jays. Another off day. Here for 3 against the Tigers. And then it's after that Tiger series that you finally have to make any kind of significant travel in the course of this month. You're at Miami for 3 games. Marlins are not good. Cubs need to take advantage of that series. Then it's 3 in Pittsburgh. Cubs tend to play pretty well at PNC, to say the least. Then another off day on August 29th. And then you start a 3-game set with the Nats on Labor Day weekend, essentially, with that wrapping up on Sunday the 1st. On Labor Day, you're starting a 3-game set with the Pirates at Wrigley. That's a 3-game set starting on the 2nd. Then you have an off day on the 5th. Then you have the big bag Yankees coming to town the 6th through the 8th. Obviously, Rizzo coming back. That's going to be worth that series alone. Then you got 3 with the Dodgers. And then you only play really one juggernaut down the stretch from there. Because after the Dodgers series, it's an off day, 3 with the Rockies in Colorado. Put the ball in the air, baby. Let's hit some home runs. 3 with the Athletics at Wrigley. 4 with the Nationals at Wrigley. All consecutive, 7 consecutive games at Wrigley. 3 in Philadelphia, an off day, and 3 with the Reds to finish up the weekend when September 29th is the last game of the season. It's a 2:20 start, which I think is very interesting for that game. It is not a 1:20 start. I can promise you right now it's because the Bears play at noon that day. That's exactly why they start a little bit later. But nonetheless, you hear that schedule and you go, there's a chance. There's a real good chance here that the Cubs can do some cool shit with this down the stretch. And I'm here to see it. So Cubs playoff hopes. They're very much not dead. They need a lot of help, but they're very much not dead over the course of this whole thing. Before we look ahead to get to some comments here, Jay asks, live show Saturday after the game or show Sunday night? It'll be a Sunday night show. It will not be after the game on Saturday, especially because I think there's an outside chance that some panelists will be at the game on Saturday. That's a huge question mark, but it's possible. So that will certainly not happen. Jeremiah says Wednesday night at Cleveland is always a special time. Yes, it is, Jeremiah. Yes, it is. He also follows that up and says it's a friendly September for the Cubbies, 16 home games. Yeah, and really, if you think about it, August was that way too. You just finished 7 consecutive home games for August, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 home games in August as well. So very friendly home slate down the stretch here for the Cubs as well, and very minimal travel. You've one more trip to the West Coast. That's probably the worst travel they have. That's the 3 with the Dodgers, the off day, and then 3 with the Rockies. but that's it. And you get to go way out there and then you work your way back. So overall, the schedule is pretty favorable to them in terms of traveling as well, because you stay largely east of the Mississippi for all but a handful of games. Hank says here, it'd be a little worried if the Cubs finish strong and just miss the playoffs, that it might reinforce Hoyer's stubborn stay the course stance. Um, that's a very interesting comment, Hank, and I feel that. I think there could be some stubborn stay the course, but I do think they acknowledge that there is going to need to be some kind of addition, right? Bellinger's probably back next year. Let's be honest. Let's call it what it is. Your infield is largely back next year. Your outfield is largely back next year, PCA included. Maybe you go out and get a starter. I think that's a very realistic possibility because you do have Kyle Hendricks who's coming off your books. I think they're going to have to go pay for a starter. But I think that's why they kept Jameson time, right? Was to say, hey, look, why go pay two starters when we've got a guy who's pitching a sub 3.5 ERA right now at less than $20 million a year. In addition to that, you're going to lose a big money with Drew Smiley coming off your books. That's like another 10.5 million right there. You're going to lose another, you've already lost the Yan Gomes money off your books. I think they're going to spend a little bit. Like, I think there's going to be spending. Unfortunately, this is really not a great offseason to like go bonkers in the sense of like it's Juan Soto's the biggest fish, right? But there's good players. And I think there's a lot of good players that still make this Cubs team better. I think largely there's an opportunity for, I don't know what the hell my neighbors are doing. There's largely an opportunity for them to improve right field. And I mean that defensively as well. Like I think Sayoc can very much slide into a DH role now that Morel is gone. And we know Paredes can play third base. But like Jeremiah said here in the comments, he just said Garrett Cole can opt out. So Garrett Cole's an option. There's a lot of good pitching options. That's why I think the Cubs are going to get another starter because you figure that replaces Hendricks and then some combination of Assad, Brown, Wicks are probably going to be your fifth starter, one of those three, with Shota, Steele, Tyone, and insert free agent acquisition here. I think given how the injuries have gone this year, there's a very easy chance that Jed sees that and goes, we do need a starter because all these kids we were hoping were going to come up this year and be important pieces, and they largely were for stretches of time, but they all got hurt, right? Ben Brown's still hurt. We've barely seen Jordan Wicks this year. Assad's been good, but we've seen some, injury to Assad this year as well, and he really hasn't been the same pitcher since the injury. He hasn't been bad per se, but he hasn't been like Javier Assad that people were talking about could be an NL Cy Young contender early on this year. So I think that he can't be too stubborn in the stay the course. I still think the Cubs, if they're going to make significant improvements to this team, it's going to be through the trade market. Like I think they're going to make a free agent splash. Like I think they'll go get one or two names. But I think if they're really going to upgrade this team, it's going to be via trade. And I think that's why, and this was another piece of news that we really didn't touch a whole lot on Sunday night show that we can touch on here now. You have Matt Shaw. Hold on, let me rephrase that. So Shaw, Alcantara, and Triantos all got promoted to AAA Iowa, right? In addition to that, you're going to have, so now for the Cubs' top prospects, your number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 prospects are all in Iowa, as well as your number 8 and your number 11 prospects. So do the math. What is that? 8 of your top 11 are in AAA Iowa. BJ Murray's number 11. Number 8 is Michael Arias. And then you have Alcantara. I'm going in reverse order. Alcantara, Casey. No, Casey's not it either. Ballesteros, sorry. Alcantara, Ballesteros, Triantos, Casey, Shaw, Horton are all in Iowa. So I think that is going to be where they could very well deal from that pool. And that's why all these guys are in Iowa. They want to see them for the last month of the season. against largely guys that could be considered big league pitching. Because you've seen Owen Casey there all season, and he's put up a good year. He's been a little hurt, but he's had a good year. Cade Horton's been hurt. So obviously, Cade Horton is largely a what if still. And I think that further bumps their need to go out and get a starter in free agency. But then you can see what Shaw and Alcantara and Triantos are at this point in time. Because if you think they're close and can fill a hole, maybe they fill the hole in terms of coming up and replacing a Nico Horner per se, if he was to be traded. But then there's also the chance that one of those guys gets moved in a deal to go get a big time player. So it gives them options. It gives them more flexibility. And then they still have tons of talent down the pipeline as well. Jefferson Rojas is years away, who looks really good. Drew Gray is a big lefty, number 10 prospect in the system. So they still have a lot of guys that are far enough away where like the integrity of the system is going to be good for years to come. And they can certainly deal from strength. But you have a lot of guys that are knocking on the doorstep that either need to have a place to play or need to be moved to find a place to play, and maybe you upgrade it that way. Couple more comments. Again, the Cole opt-out comment. Yep, Corbin Burns is a free agent this year as well. Max Fried and Shane Bieber. Bieber coming off of Tommy John, so his price might be down, maybe, and plus with Carter Hawkins' familiarity, that's a guy that could potentially come in and be a part of this rotation next year. So that'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see what happens. Tamina Zeus is here. He's just going to ask this. With Shaw, Triantos, Alcantara, Ballesteros, and Casey all knocking on the door, who do you get rid of to make room for them? I don't know if it's necessarily going to be making room for prospects. It might be trading prospects to improve something already on your roster. That being said, if I had to tell you who they're going to try and make space for, to me, right field's easy because you can move Seiya Suzuki to DH. Belly can split time between first and center. PCA obviously in center. I think there's a world where Cody Bellinger could get traded as a part of a bigger deal. Like I really do. I don't think that's out of the question. So right field is a place where an Alcantara or a Casey could come up and play probably right away. In addition to that, second base is probably the most likely spot now, especially now that Paredes is at third with multiple years of control beyond this one, 3 years of control beyond this season. So, Shaw could probably come up and play second right away, Triantos. So those guys would probably play there. In terms of Ballesteros, if they truly believe Ballesteros can catch, he might come up and split time with Miggy. That being said, I don't know if he's a full-time catcher. Maybe he is better suited to be a DH. And if that's the case, he easily could be a piece that they move. But I don't know. It'll be really interesting to see what happens from there. Jeremiah says Juan Soto free agent too. He doubts the Yankees will let him go. Yeah, I mean Soto is the biggest fish in the market, like I said a little bit earlier. But I don't think he's coming to the Cubs. I would love to see Juan Soto in right field every day. I think if they go out and get him and they go get a starting pitcher, they can just run it. And then you have all that prospect capital to go get guys at the deadline to really beef up your chances if you are a competitive team next year. I just don't see him leaving New York. I think the Yankees are going to find a way to get it done. And once you turn away from that, the best bat to me that is exciting, in my humble opinion, is a guy like Anthony Santander from the Orioles, because I don't think Orioles are going to pay him. So he's a guy that I would truly appreciate seeing. There was a comment from a little bit earlier regarding guys they could go get from Omar. He said Wilmer Flores is available. He could be a good fit. I just don't know where he plays. That's my only concern. Third base isn't a hole anymore. He's largely a first baseman, and we were just talking about how good Michael Busch is. So I don't know if he's necessarily the best name to put there. Omar also says the Cubs need to give young prospects be in MLB big league level, give them experience versus all teams. Yeah, I mean that's why they're getting to AAA. That's where they're going to play. None of these guys are going to play at the major league level right now. Nobody is going to supplant a Dansby Swanson this late in the season. Nobody's going to supplant an Ian Happ this late in the season, Seiya Suzuki, etc. So that's going to be, where we have to say. Hank says Belly has the final say with his opt-out clause. He does, but he's not necessarily – he's going to probably opt into that contract. I don't think he's getting more than $27 million next year. Let's just call it what it is. He's been good. I don't think he's been $27 million good. So I think he is opting into that contract no matter what. And if he wants to opt out, then he opts out. But if you're going to go trade for somebody big, you have to free up a hole somewhere. And it might be Belly plus prospects. And a team might try to convince Bellinger, hey, take your 27 million for this one season, play for us. And then if you want to opt out next year and try to go get more than 20 million in that third year, do it. So yeah, he does have some say, but he's also one of the few players on this team that doesn't have that no trade, right? Now, granted, baseball, it's a lot easier to move a no trade clause. So maybe a Suzuki, an Ian Happ, if they really needed to trade somebody, but I think that would only come if it's a really big deal that they're making. It'll be interesting. It'll be interesting to see, but I think they have options, and that's why you're seeing them upgrade right now or promote guys within the system to start getting them that close to big league action. So they kind of have a better idea of what they have and who is true trade chips coming into the off season versus who are guys that they identify as, hey, this guy's going to come up and fill a hole somehow. One more comment here from Jeremiah. His biggest position of need is at catcher. Sure. I mean, Miggy's been really good ever since they let Jan Gomes leave, which is ironic in a lot of ways. I think Miggy's going to continue to be good into next year. I think they probably will go try to get a veteran catcher. That's why I don't think it'll be Ballesteros next year. I think they're going to leave Ballesteros in AAA and just let him continue to rake. He, to me, is the one guy they could easily trade because I think he can go anywhere else and be a DH or a first baseman, whereas like the Cubs are kind of set in both of those spots for the time being. So let me be interested to see what happens from there. Let's go ahead and move forward now, finally, because next up is the Chicago White Sox. They cannot break their losing streak against the Cubs. They broke that yesterday against the Oakland Athletics. So 21 was the official number that it ends at. Thank God, because that would have been unbearable if the White Sox beat the Cubs in one of these two games. But that being said, the Cubs should take care of business in these next two games against the White Sox when it's all said and done. Couple good pitching matchups as well. Ironically, I think Saturday's game a little underwhelming from the White Sox side, but we do get to see Garrett Crochet. He's now granted because the inning count, he's not pitching a lot of innings. So if you do get to Crochet, you're probably going to get to their bullpen because their bullpen's not very good. But it will be Taillon going for the Cubs on Friday. That'll be a 7:10 start on the South Side. And you can catch this one on Marquee Sports Network. If you want to watch the White Sox broadcast, God forbid you want to watch that. That'll be on NBC Sports Chicago. Crochet, 3.19 ERA. Taillon with a 3.25 ERA coming in this one. And then it'll be Justin Steele on Saturday. Saturday's game is a 6:15 game. That one's also on Fox. So that will be a national game. Chris Flexen will throw for the White Sox. Should give them some decent length, but his 5.53 ERA, pardon me, leaves a lot to be desired. Plain and simple, the White Sox are not a good baseball team this year. The Cubs should absolutely walk in and take care of business. Whether or not that happens obviously remains to be seen, but these are probably the two most winnable games on their schedule for the month of August, and they should go win them. I would hope that they take care of business. It's just a 2-game set. You have bookend off days around this series as well. This is the time just, hey, go get 2 wins, enjoy your off day. You're only having to go to Cleveland then, and then back to Wrigley. There's not a lot of travel. There's not a lot. Just go take care of business. Plain and simple. Pitch well. You got 2 really good starters on the bump. Go hit some balls. It's a lot easier to go, hit balls out of the ballpark with the South Side. It's very much a hitter's park in comparison to Wrigley. Just go take care of business. That's all we want to see. Jeremiah says here, only reason he liked White Sox broadcasts was because of Benetti. I tend to agree. I was the exact same way until, like you noted, he graduated over to the Tigers. Schifrin, I know, has also pissed off a lot of White Sox fans. Again, being here at On Tap, I talk to all the guys over at Sox on Tap pretty regularly. They're ready for baseball to be over. And I hope the Cubs can kind of kick their team while they're down because at this point, the Cubs can take every win they can get. Cubbies are just 3 games below 500 and only 5.5 out in the wild card. So anything can happen from here. Before I log off, everybody, I want to first off thank everybody for joining in. This comment section was electric over the last hour. So shout out to everybody that joined us here in the comment section. If you want to in the future comment along, just like Hank and Jeremiah and Omar and Darren and a number of other names, Tomina too as well, and Jay, and there was one more, I believe it was Sean a little bit earlier. I'm trying to find it. There's just so many in here. Yeah, it was Sean. If you want to be like them, you can head over to the YouTube channel again, like, subscribe, hit the bell button. You'll know when we go live. Or you can comment from X. If you're watching along on X, you can comment along. We can see them on X. You can also do the same from Facebook as well. Again, if you follow Cubs on Tap, be sure to follow at On Tap Sportsnet for the time being, as that is where all these broadcasts will be hosted from, is the On Tap Sportsnet X account. So be sure to head over there as well and follow along there. As always, Cubs on Tap, one of two official Cubs podcasts here, covering the Chicago Cubs for your On Tap Sports Net. The Dingers boys were live earlier this week. We got to see them on our watch along recently. The watch alongs will be back, by the way, for those that are curious, hoping that happens in the Cleveland series. They're early games, so we'll see. You might be stuck with me for one of those nights for a large majority of the game. But nonetheless, we're hoping to bring those back. But we got to see Mitch and Jake on the last one. Be sure to follow those guys at Dinger Cubs on the socials. Follow us as well at Cubbies on Tap. I am at Loose on Tap. And you know where to find all the other guys. Teddy Freddy 270, Joey Knows Nothing, Juice on Tap, Nick _ on Tap, Silent Bob _2, that's our boy Bobby Foster, and Bulls Guy Rob, that's our boy Rob Wrigley. Bulls, Bears, Blackhawks, you know the drill. Follow all of those as well. Bears on Tap. Things are spicing up. Hard Knocks was really good. I got to see most of it. I haven't totally finished it yet. But Bears season right around the corner. Bulls and Blackhawks will be kind of starting to stir toward the end of August and in early September as well. So be sure to follow those over there. Bulls on Tap, Four Feathers Pod. Before it is all said and done here in fall sports are upon us. And yes, Cubs fans, again, you have friends that like the Southsiders. They're in a lot of pain. We have friends that like the Southsiders. They are also in a lot of pain. Your friends, send them to our friends. They can be friends over at Sox on Tap. Once again, ontapsportsnet.com and ontapsportsnet on the socials, the OnTap Sports Network. Go and check out what's on tap in Chicago sports. You're too kind. No, you're too kind, Jeremiah. Seriously, appreciate you guys joining. The comment section truly does make these shows fun. I hope people understand that, especially when I do solos like this. So appreciate you guys jumping along and being very participative and sharing your thoughts and opinions. Again, I don't judge anybody for their thoughts and opinions. I tell you what I'm thinking, but I hope you would tell me what you're thinking. And that's what's the fun of it. Tomina too, appreciate you as always and appreciate everybody once again. We will be back with you on Sunday following the Sox series, but 2 off days in between 2 games with the Southsiders on the South Side. Enjoy some off days. The weather's going to be stunning and gorgeous here in Chicago. Be sure to get out and do something over here. Air and Water shows this weekend. If you're looking to venture down to the city and you're in the Chicagoland area, do that. Air and Water show is one of the coolest things that happens yearly, in my opinion, in Chicago. I'm hoping to make it there this weekend as well. And otherwise, we'll see you after these 2 games with the White Sox. Sunday night is when we'll come to you live, despite the series ending after Saturday night's game. I am Ron Luce. As always, we appreciate you guys. And we'll get out here with a good old FTC, FTB, FTT, I guess, for this series. And let's go, Cubbies.